In true crime, there's a familiar pattern. When someone vanishes, there is always a face the cameras return to. A spouse, a parent, a partner, the person closest to the missing, and often the person the public feels safest trusting. In this case, that person was Eleanor Whitmore. She was 39, soft-spoken, calm. Her grief appeared controlled and deliberate. She cooperated fully with the police from the first interview. She answered questions directly. She did not speculate. She did not accuse. Most notably, she did not cry. Officers described her as reserved but helpful. At the time, nothing about her behavior warranted suspicion. She was known as the devoted grieving widow who handed out water bottles to volunteers. The one who joined search parties every morning, rain or shine, walking miles of forest with swollen feet and red-rimmed eyes. The one who never gave up hope. The soft-spoken woman who printed missing person flyers at her own expense. Reporters called her brave. Detectives called her cooperative. Volunteers called her inspiring. What no one realized, not the volunteers, not the media, not even the police, was that Eleanor wasn't searching for her husband. She was making sure no one else found him. No one suspected her. Not for 8 months. And by the time the truth surfaced, it was already far too late. On October 14th at 6:42 p.m., Thomas Whitmore left his home in Brookvale, a quiet semi-rural town tucked between dense woodland and winding back roads. Brookvale was a quiet town defined by routine. People left doors unlocked. Neighbors noticed unfamiliar cars. Missing person cases were almost unheard of. That changed on a Thursday evening when Thomas Whitmore failed to return from his walk. Thomas Whitmore was 43 years old, a civil engineer with no criminal history, no financial trouble, and no known enemies. He told his wife he was going for a walk. That alone wasn't unusual. He always followed the same wooded trail just outside Brookvale. Always returned home within 45 minutes. Neighbors saw him pass the trailhead. A jogger noticed him near the creek. That was the last confirmed sighting of Thomas Whitmore. At 8:11 p.m., Eleanor called his phone. No answer. At 8:32, she texted him. No response. By 9:04 p.m., she contacted the police. She sounded calm but worried. Not frantic. Not hysterical. Just precise. She told the dispatcher one thing that immediately stood out. He's never late. Not like this. By sunrise, Brookvale organized volunteer search parties. Police units, search and rescue teams, volunteer groups, firefighters, hunters, church members, and local residents combed the trail and surrounding forested areas from end to end. Search dogs tracked Thomas's scent to a ridge near the creek, and then it stopped. No blood, no struggle, no signs of a fall. It was as if Thomas had simply vanished. Every day, Eleanor arrived at the command post with coffee and donuts. She hugged deputies, thanked volunteers, memorized names. She insisted on joining the search herself. Her presence reassured volunteers. She became a symbol of hope. Against protocol, police allowed it. At the time, it felt compassionate. Later, it would feel like a mistake. Eleanor walked every search. Morning, afternoon, sometimes both. She knew the terrain well, too well. She pointed out old footpaths, suggested grid patterns, helped coordinate volunteer teams. Reporters began filming her regularly. She spoke softly, carefully choosing her words. I just want him home. The town rallied around her. She became the emotional center of the case. And that was exactly where she wanted to be. As days passed with no sign of Thomas, investigators did what they always do. Detectives looked into the Whitmore marriage. On the surface, it appeared stable. No domestic staff, no known affairs, no financial distress. Eleanor worked part-time at a library. Thomas was a civil engineer with a steady income. Married for 12 years. No children. Friends described them as quiet, private. But investigators noticed something subtle. Eleanor never spoke about missing Thomas. She spoke about finding him. And once, during an interview, she said something that lingered. If something happened, I don't think it was an accident. That comment raised eyebrows. How could she know that? She quickly moved on. But detectives didn't forget it. Detectives asked the question they hated asking. Did Thomas have enemies? Eleanor answered without hesitation. No. Weeks passed. Then months. Most families eventually stepped back. Grief exhaustion set in. Eleanor didn't. She organized weekend volunteer efforts, mapped grid patterns, coordinated social media updates. She even corrected officers when they mispronounced trail names. One deputy privately joked, she could run run this investigation herself. She knew where we'd already been and where we wouldn't go again. At the time, it sounded helpful. In hindsight, it sounded calculated. The first real inconsistency appeared 73 days after Thomas disappeared. A hunter reported finding a men's hiking boot near the creek. It belonged to Thomas Whitmore. The strange part? That area had already been searched, thoroughly, multiple times. When detectives asked Eleanor about it, her reaction was delayed by just a fraction of a second. Then she said, maybe it washed downstream? But the boot was dry. Placed, not lost. That discovery changed everything. Quietly, the police shifted focus. Not publicly, but internally. That night, detectives quietly began re-evaluating everything, including Eleanor. Investigators pulled phone records. Thomas's phone was gone, but Eleanor's wasn't. Investigators noticed something subtle. On the night Thomas disappeared, Eleanor's phone showed a brief loss of signal between 7:18 p.m. and 7:27 p.m., right near the creek, the same area where the boot was found. She had told police she stayed home all evening. When confronted, she smiled politely. I must have stepped outside. Our reception is awful. It was plausible, but now nothing felt accidental. But detectives were now watching her closely. 8 months after the disappearance, Eleanor organized another volunteer search. That same day, remains were discovered in a shallow ravine less than half a mile from the trail. Dental records confirmed it was Thomas. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Time of death: the night he vanished. The ravine sat just outside the primary search grids. Grids Eleanor had helped design. She collapsed when informed. Cried. Screamed. The cameras captured it all. But investigators were no longer watching her tears. They were watching her patterns. While processing the Whitmore home, detectives found something overlooked before. A leather-bound journal tucked behind old tax documents. It belonged to Thomas. The entries were calm at first, then became increasingly uneasy. I think Eleanor suspects I'm planning to leave. She keeps asking about the insurance. I don't feel safe telling her yet. The final entry, dated the day he disappeared, read, if something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. At that moment, the case changed forever. Investigators dug deeper. They uncovered a $750,000 life insurance policy Eleanor had taken out on Thomas 6 months before his disappearance. She was the sole beneficiary. She had memorized search maps because she designed the search boundaries to avoid the ravine. She joined search parties not to help find Thomas, but to make sure no one else did. Then came the final revelation. A forensic analysis of soil samples taken from Eleanor's hiking boots she wore to every search, matched the ravine where Thomas's body was found. She had been standing over his grave, again, and again, and again. During interrogation, Eleanor finally spoke. She didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She said, I didn't kill him to escape. I killed him so I wouldn't be alone. She explained everything. Thomas was leaving. He was planning to disappear, change identities, start over. She followed him that night, confronted him, pushed him. He fell. And in that moment, she realized something. If she helped look for him, if she became the symbol of hope, no one would ever suspect her. And she was right, until the very end. Eleanor Whitmore was convicted of second-degree murder. She never showed remorse. In fact, she once told a prison counselor, I loved him more than anyone else ever did. That's why I couldn't let him leave. The case became a chilling reminder of a truth investigators now repeat often. Sometimes the person leading the search is the one who already knows exactly where the body is. 4 more slow-burn true crime stories with shocking twists, investigative depth, and unforgettable endings. Subscribe to Hidden Motives, where crimes refuse to stay buried.